Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the HeartStream Musings podcast. I'm so excited because today I have my first guest. You're my first guest.
Oh, I love this. Oh my God, I'm obsessed with it.
You're my first guest. So be easy. I've never done this before. But I wanted to introduce Cami from the Blossom Experiment. And I was on her podcast and I just absolutely love her. I adore her. We always just have so much fun together. And we met actually part from another community that we are part of. And we just really vibed. And I just love her essence, what she's about. I remember downloading your podcast, I think before you asked me to be on there. And I was like, when you were switching, you were talking so much about authenticity, your pivot. And I said, oh my gosh, this girl is just speaking my language. And so that's when I reached out. But before we get into the actual episode, I would love for you to introduce yourself to my audience and just describe who you are, what you do, and all that good stuff.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me, especially as your first guest. I feel so honored. And honestly, everything that you just said, I feel the same. So I love the conversation that we had in my podcast. And, we could have talked for 3 more hours and I would be completely okay. So I'm really, really grateful to be here. And I'm really excited for the conversation that we're going to have as well. So my name is Camille. I'm originally from Brazil. But although I am from Brazil, I feel really like I don't really identify with being from Brazil or someplace specifically. Since I graduated from college, my dream was to become like a quote unquote digital nomad. I don't really like that expression, but whatever, that is the way that we nowadays talk about people who travel and work around the world. So that was like my huge dream. And I remember that I used to do like these mood boards and write about how I wanted freedom and flexibility in my life and how this was like my obsession. And no one believed in me because at that time it was also like 2017, 2016. So it was quite new. It wasn't like a normal thing to have like a remote job. And the people that had a remote job, they were normally like those big influencers on Instagram. So either you were an influencer on Instagram or you were just like in a 9 to 5 and just like shut up and do your job. So I used to talk about how I wanted to, live in this way and things like that. And everyone, like including my family, they were like, I mean, just go get a job and, but I always had this like, I don't know, this thing that was inside of me of knowing that it was possible, for me to create this. And I think that eventually after that, I started getting into personal development, like law of attraction, manifestation, The Secret, and things like that, and mindset work and inner child and traumas, blah, blah, blah. So eventually I would say that in 2019, I started traveling more. So I went to Bali, I lived there for 4 months. Then my whole thing was that I was gonna go then to Europe in 2020. I was going to travel around. We all know what happened in 2020. So COVID hit. I had to go back to Brazil. But I would say that between the 2019 and 2020 years, they were years of a lot of growth for me. Mm-hmm. They were years in which I had to look a lot into my own self, my relationship with my body, my relationship to my self-love as well, because at that point I was healing my disordered eating of like 8 years, a lot of body dysmorphia. I was in the process of like gaining weight because I was constricting my food intake so much for like as long as I can remember, and I hated myself, I hated my body, and I looked at myself and I perceived my body in a completely different way from what it actually was. Like when I look at photos now, I'm like, girl, you were like a freaking, like, I was so small, and I looked at myself and I thought that I was like so big, and I felt like I couldn't occupy, like I wasn't enough to occupy space in the world. So I feel like I just wanted to be smaller and smaller and like the smallest that I could. And so throughout like between 2019 and 2020, it was when I was really going through like this healing process, gaining weight, dealing with the fact that I was gaining weight and learning how to love my body. I went to Bali and did my second yoga teacher training, which really, really helped for me to,
Yeah.
develop even more connection to my body. And I feel like towards the end of 2020 was when I was getting out of this cocoon, and I was like, I want to help people. I want to help people with connecting to their bodies. I want to help people with connecting to their inner worlds. I think that that is like the big
Mm.
thing that I was always obsessed with since I was a child, like this inner world that is so curious to me, like why humans act the way that they act, why they are the way that they are, why they drink and eat and love and whatever, why they do the way the things that they do in the way that they do. And so in the end of 2020, like August, September, I actually launched my podcast, the Blossom Experiment podcast. And in the beginning, it was just an exploration of what it was to be human. And
Right.
it all, like, the name of it was based from the lotus flower. So after like 2 years of so so much like deep work, I saw myself as, because the lotus flower, I don't know if you know, but it's like this flower that blossoms from the mud. And I saw myself blossoming from my shadow, from all of my traumas and my fears and my pain and
Mm.
my hurt. And I wanted to help people do the same. I wanted to show people that it was possible to blossom from all of these challenges that we have inside, and all of these shadows, and all of the mud, quote unquote, that we have inside. Like, the mud is a beautiful
Yeah.
thing. So so I named it the Blossom Experiment. And since then I've been just podcasting about, honestly, whatever I feel I feel like.
Yeah.
It's become kind of like my diary into the world, and also having people talking about their authentic ways of living, and connecting to intuition. And I feel like one of my big purposes in life is actually showing people what is possible and what are the multiple ways that you can live your life and create your life. Because when I was like 20 years old, wanting to live and travel and work and travel the world, no one believed in
Mm.
me. And now, and like, I was able to eventually get to the point that I am now traveling and working remotely and things like that. And I just
Yeah.
want to show people that they don't have to fit into a mold. They don't have to outsource, as we talked in my podcast a lot. They don't have to
Yeah.
outsource their authenticity and their authority and their decisions and their powers. They can look inside of themselves and follow the inner guidance that is leading them, and just trusting their dreams as well. And I love
Mm.
having the platform of my podcast to showcase different people living and creating lives in different ways, and perceiving life in different ways, to show people that it is possible. And just giving them a permission slip to trust their authenticity and trust their intuition. So I would say that in a nutshell, I feel like I'm someone who loves humans. I love like intuition, and I just love, understanding humans and their inner worlds
Yeah.
in general.
There's just so many like gems in there that I didn't even know about you. I'm like, wait, so you
Yeah,
were in Bali for? I was like, okay, y'all, I have never ever heard Cami's story like in one in one like 5 minute
it's
talk.
true.
I was like, oh my gosh, you were in Bali and then you had to go back to Brazil, and then you went back again, and then I didn't know you were like, I didn't even know you got certified in yoga teacher training.
Yeah, I'm actually so I'm 400. I have a 400-hour certification in yoga. Like, I did 2 certifications, and I'm also certified as
Wow.
an integrative nutrition health coach by
Right.
IIN. Like,
Uh-huh.
random, like, because I really, like, I've always been obsessed with like body, but in like a good way as well.
Yes.
Like, I love wellness, I love health, I love healthy eating. Like, I'm someone who will go into the grocery store and I'll look like staying there for like hours looking at the ingredients, be like, baby, did you know that this sausage has 20 grams of but not in a disordered eating anymore, just because I genuinely love it.
Wow. I feel like there are so many like directions we can go, because even when you were talking about how like the idea of like being physically small, like thinking that you didn't have like any worthiness to take up space in the world, and that's how it showed, and that's how it manifested in being small, because that is something I can actually relate to too.
Oh,
So there's
really?
that. Yeah. That's, I was like, oh, that's so interesting. Cause I had a little bit of disordered eating and I don't talk about it that much, but it was just more of, it wasn't like a big part of my story. Honestly, I think a lot of people do just because of the diet culture that we live in. Like
Mm-hmm,
it is
mm-hmm.
just so rampant. Um, but I used that as a way because there was like all these different coping mechanisms I had, right? Like it was like the drinking. Once I got sober, I was like, all right, take that off the list. What else is there? Okay, let me do the toxic
Food.
relationships. Once that was done, I was like, okay, I guess I have to do another
Okay,
one.
what else?
Yeah, I was like, okay, let me do food. Like, you know what I mean? It just like went down the fucking list.
Now shopping.
Right. And so literally that was like something that came up for me when I was working through that. It was like, let me find comfort in food, body appearance, because that's just something that's so prevalent in society of like how our worthiness is deemed from how we actually look on the outside. But yeah,
Yeah.
that was just a lot of things. But that's not what we're going to
Yeah.
talk about today.
Yeah, no.
That could
But
be for
in
another
saying
one.
that though, yeah, but in
Uh-huh.
saying that, like I had to do a lot of inner work. And I
Mm,
think that this connects to what we are wanting to talk about today. Because I think that there is so much to say about how we will disconnect ourselves from our bodies and our inner
mm,
signals of and like hunger cues to be there for
yes.
other people, like to show up as another version of ourselves for other people. So instead of like trusting my body and knowing that I need to eat, I will starve so I can have a specific body. So I will be um, receiving attachment and care from other people. And I feel
Yes.
like, especially like I don't know,
Yes.
like in my house when I grew up in a house where my grandparents, they had both of them like had eating disorders. One had binge eating and the other one had anorexia. And then
Mm,
my dad, from there, he used to have like kind of messed up relationship with his body. And my mom, she was a ballerina and she was an actress as well, so that led her to have a lot of preconceived notions about her body and everything, and how all of them would project stuff on me and also my sister and my cousins. Like we all have really similar things,
wow.
like the way that we relate to food and everything, and how that built something inside of me that was like, either I have to be small and thin and like have this specific body, or I won't receive like attachment. I won't fit in. I won't receive care. I won't be loved, basically. So I think that
Mm,
that ties in a lot with the theme of like authenticity versus attachment, because like instead of honoring your authenticity, your authentic needs, I will delete them so I can be loved by my caretakers, because I can see that my body's a problem for them, you know. And I used to be a chubby, like, I don't know if we can say that anymore. I don't even know like the language, what is right or wrong. Like I used to be a kid that was fat, you know. So I saw how that impacted my relationship with my family, and how
oh,
when I lost weight, how I was more accepted, you know. Not that
yeah.
they were doing that on purpose, because it was super subconscious for them.
Right. Because you said they were projecting a lot of that stuff onto you. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so how did you, so speaking on the topic of like authenticity and attachment, which is something that's so interesting, that you brought up in our conversation prior to starting the recording of this, because I've never actually heard the two of them put together. It's always like attachment comes from how your parents treat you, but we often don't talk about the result and the consequence of what happens of how to actually get that attachment. So I'd love for you to share what just sparked this conversation topic for you.
Yeah. So I was reading the book by Gabor Mate. He is a Hungarian, I think it's a physician, I don't know. He
Mhm.
talks a lot about trauma and how trauma is stored in the body. And he just released this, I don't know if it's like super new. It's between this year or last year, like 2022, 2023. His new book called The Myth of Normal. And during the book, he talks a lot, like his whole thing in the book is to explain to us why society is becoming more sick, and how it's not connected necessarily to like the pollutants on the air, but how
Hmm.
it's so connected with the stress, and how diseases like cancer, lupus and things like that, like those big diseases, they are not a one thing in the moment of someone's life. They are a process that is being built since you are young, and how they are connected to unprocessed emotions. So basically, how
Wow.
cancer is a process of a lifetime of unprocessed emotions and certain personality traits. And it's just a really, really interesting book that talks about mind body connection and mind body, and how medicine nowadays has to start looking at diseases as a connection of mind and body, like not
Mm-hmm.
just you have cancer, this is it. It's like, okay, how is your stress in your life and how we can deal with this in a holistic approach, basically. So
Mm-hmm.
the entire book is about this, and then eventually I got to this chapter that he talks about authenticity versus attachment. And the whole idea between in the inside of this chapter is how authenticity and attachment, they are both core needs of human behavior and humans. So
Right.
when we are young, we need the attachment to survive, and we need to be attached to our mothers and some kind of community to survive. Like we like, it's obvious we need it, like you can't survive
Yeah.
if you don't have like someone taking care of you as a baby. But however, how we also need to be authentic and honor our authentic needs. And
Mm-hmm.
it was so interesting throughout the chapter how he brings the idea that sometimes we will delete our own selves, and we will self abandon, let's say, like put it in these words, we will self
Right.
abandon abandon our authenticity and our authentic needs for the need of attachment, so we can receive the attachment and the care from others. So for example, if I'm a child and I see that my mom is not accepting of my anger, I will swallow my anger instead of allowing myself to process that emotion and to release it from my body, so that I can
Mm-hmm.
receive love and affection from my mom. However, how does
Right.
that affect me in the long term in a chronic way? Because I'm constantly
Mm.
swallowing that authenticity, so I can give space for this attachment to come through.
Right. That's so interesting because it's like you were talking about how it becomes a chronic condition and how he's putting the two and two together of like the emotions are actually contributing to people's ailments. And it's not just, it's like honestly, it's like holistic ailments, it's spiritual ailments. And it's so interesting because not many doctors look at what are the underlying effects. And so it reminded me of a time when I actually I was getting a bunch of UTIs. I was doing all the things.
Mm,
I was doing all of that stuff of like, oh yeah, go to the bathroom before and after, all of that. And the doctors
cranberry
just,
juice.
yeah, cranberry, everything, take supplements, and they just could not figure it out. But I knew that there was some like trauma that I needed to clear. And it was so interesting because obviously when you have a UTI, you can't have, you know, intercourse with your partner. So that physically removes you from the
Yeah.
intimacy. And so I had to work through the emotional side of like, what is the emotional trauma and intimate like trauma that I'm dealing from this that's like showing up as physical symptoms in my body. And
Mm,
so that was just like super huge of that lesson of there is always emotional stuff underneath it. And it's so interesting that this person is phrasing it as it's kind of like the starting point almost of like with your parents, the attachment, the type of attachment system that you identify with, whether you're anxious or avoidant, and how that actually kind of nurtures you to be this person of just swallowing a lot of who yourself in order to actually get that love that you crave as a child. Because like you said, if you don't have your, like, you need mother's milk, you need love and affection, you actually need that more. I mean, obviously you need both equally, your basic needs and also your emotional needs, but like as a child, that's all you know, that's all you crave for. So interesting.
Yeah. And even when we like to make the full circle with the like previous story, like authentically I know that I want food, but like in regards to attachment, if I am like thinner, my mom will love me more, so I'll delete myself and self abandon
Mm,
so I can receive this love from my mother. And then how does this affect me in a long term, you know, like if you're
yeah.
not so aware of it, or if at some point you don't stop yourself to actually look at this, how could that affect my relationship with like men and with, I don't know, like
Hmm.
my boss or other people in the world, not only with food but with anything else, you know. And it's really interesting because before we were talking about like how does this show up in a relationship. And personally, so I've been in a relationship now with my new boyfriend for 8 months,
Hmm.
and I am someone who's very anxiously attached,
Mm,
but
hmm.
and he's also kind of anxiously attached, but we also like go from the anxious to the avoidant sometimes. But
Oh, so you
anyways,
vacillate. Yeah.
yeah, so we also, yeah, but one thing, for example, that I was telling you is that me, for example, like I am super tired, but I'll force myself to stay up like a little kid because I don't want to go to bed alone, you know? And it's so interesting because I'm a freaking 30 years old. Like, you know, I'm not scared of going to bed, but when I'm laying down there without him, I feel like my inner child is feeling like abandoned, it's feeling afraid, it's feeling
Mm,
anxious, you know? And so I have to, at the same time that I have to honor that authenticity, I also have to go through the releasing of all of this fear of not being attached or not receiving the closeness, you know? And I think
yeah.
that inside of this fear that lives so much of our relationship with our inner child,
Hmm. And so how do
unresolved.
you, yeah, so how do you combat that? Or like what happens when you have like that desire to attach or like those bids for connection and then it's like almost compromising yourself in a way. So then what do you do now? What are the tools that you use?
That's a great question.
You're
Because
like,
I don't. No, just kidding. So I think that throughout a big part of our relationship, I was abandoning, like it was either he was abandoning himself, and instead of going to sleep later, he would force himself to go to sleep at the same time as me because he saw how important that was for me.
oh,
But that would create resentment at some point, or I would abandon myself, stay later with him, but then resent him and resent myself because I was so tired, you know? So at
oh,
some point, like, and we have really open conversations about like trauma, blah, blah, blah.
yeah,
We both go to therapy. So we both understood that like the level of anxiety that I was feeling was not um conducive, like was not didn't
yeah,
make sense with the physical reality, because I am 30 years old, he's 33. We are going to, like, I'm going to bed and he's going to bed afterwards. It's okay, like
yeah.
that's the fact, you know. It's not like this big thing that's happening, he's leaving and he never shows up again, you know. So I could see how this was not aligned with the, like, the reaction that I was having was not aligned with the physical
But what do you
reality.
do in those moments? Like, okay, this is great. I'm so glad you're talking about this because I have a lot of clients who it's like the reality, right? You understand it
Mhm.
because you're at a certain age, but there's something that just like fucking takes over you where you're like,
Yeah.
the little tantrums inside or like your inner child just like comes out lashes and is like, no,
Yeah.
you're going to bed or you're staying up. Like, so what do you do in that moment when you catch yourself before you go to that place? And how do you not abandon yourself?
That's a beautiful question. And I'm so glad that we're having this conversation now instead of like 2 weeks ago, because 2 weeks ago, I would still be in another place in regards to that. But I feel like after 8 months of like either me abandoning myself or him abandoning himself, because we have this type of personality that we will abandon ourselves to take care of the other person, because that's what
Mm,
we were used to our entire lives. And
right.
how much resentment that creates. So we both were we were like self-abandoning and then being really angry about it. And we both throughout our childhood, we didn't have a safe home to express our angers. So he would get really frustrated when I was feeling angry, and he would be like, no, like what is this, like you're angry, you can't be angry. And I would be frustrated because it's like, here we go again, since I'm 0 years old, I can't express my anger, it's not welcome. And
Yeah.
then that would make me more angry. And for him it was the same, like if he would get angry, it's like, what are you doing? And then he's like, here we go again, like the same story. So it's
Yeah.
really interesting because we were both triggered in the same ways.
Right.
And I would lay down there, like, especially because he used to deal, and he sometimes still deals with it when he's really stressed, with insomnia. So sometimes it's like he could not fall asleep. He can try to fall asleep. He can't, like physically,
Mm.
like, so I would lay down there and I would try to like, breathe and go somatically into the place of where my anxiety was at, and like release it and everything. And maybe like I would love to sit here and just say like I would sit up straight and meditate and everything would be perfect, and then I would be able to fall asleep. But that didn't happen once. Okay, once in 8 freaking months, that didn't happen once. So I would try to do it. Maybe it would help for like freaking 5 minutes, but then I would just like lay down there like really anxious, or I would like get up and like, be like, just come to bed,
Yeah.
and like be in the role of the mother, which is again not really helpful at all.
Right.
So the thing that most helped me was, after a lot of therapy, was last week, or like the 2 weeks before that, I had this really big realization
Hmm.
that the anger that I was feeling towards him and all of these patterns that he was having, um, basically they were mirroring or imitating, like mimicking my mom in my life. And
Wow.
after I realized this, like the glass, just like the veil, like just went down, and I was like,
Yeah.
oh my God. Like now I can see everything, like everything from the little things that I'm angry at him to the big things. I'm
Yeah.
like, oh my God, this is like, it's my mom.
But
Like
how
my
did
mom, this
you,
is how you should feel with my mom.
yeah, how did you even get to that point of that level of self-awareness? Because some people, it's so buried into their subconscious that they just can't even see it. And then they're just playing out this whole pattern. Like if you hadn't realized that, it would have just been the same thing over and over
Yeah.
and over again. Right. And so how did you even get to that place where you were like mentally, emotionally, spiritually able to see it with such clarity?
Well, like I would say that it's been 8 years like of personal development and therapy, some kind of therapy in and out, and a lot
Yeah.
of like shadow work and blah blah blah. So I was already like, it's really interesting because I was already hyper aware of my uh, mother wound, like my
Yes.
uh, not all of them, but I had a lot of awareness of my relationship with my mom and the things that I was
Mm,
working on and things like that. But I had never connected them both in such a like strong way. And so when I
mhm.
started, what I basically did was that I started seeing every time that I got angry at him, I would see it like, okay, how is this my inner child being angry at my mom? And then I would remember a moment,
Mm,
this is where, so this is not me being angry at him. It's my inner child mad at my mom that is being
right.
projected by him. So I remember that because we had this realization together that I was being his dad and he was being my mom, and he was basically triggered at me about a lot of things that his dad used to do, and I was being triggered by him because of a lot of things that my mom used to do. And after I had this realization, I remember that one day I was like in the kitchen, like we just had this realization. I was in the kitchen and I was like either cleaning or cooking, I don't know, because I feel like this is the life of an adult, you're either cleaning or cooking, honestly. But I
Yes.
was cleaning or cooking, and I remember that I got really angry. I was like, of course I am cleaning. Of course I am cooking because he
Oh.
never does anything because blah, 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 which is a lie. Like he's someone that is really, really like beautiful on the house and everything. But I saw this come up and I was like, and this like old belief of like I have to take care of everything. And this is exactly how I felt with my mom my entire life. Like I felt like she was a
Right.
child and I had to be her mom. I had to take care of myself because then I
Mm.
had like one brother and one sister. They were twins. They came together. No one was there to take care of me. I felt resentment
Mm.
towards her. I felt anger towards her. So when I had this come up, I instantly realized it, and I was like, it doesn't have to do with him, because what is the physical reality is I'm frustrated that I'm cooking. Okay, then I'm going to tell him, baby, can you cook? Or baby, can you clean? Or baby, whatever, because he's not going to say no, because he knows how much this is important for me. He's also an adult. So I'm not dealing like, if I just, because what I used to do is that I would just like shut off, and
Yeah.
become like avoidant, and it's like silent treatment throughout the rest of the night. And then
Yeah.
he would get triggered because of my unexplained anger, because of his own motives.
Right.
And then he would get triggered, and then I would get triggered because he's triggered, and it would just like snowball. So I caught myself there, and I was like, I'm actually angry at my inner, it's not me, like it is me, but my inner child is
Yeah.
angry at my mom. It doesn't have anything to do with him, because in this physical reality,
Mm.
it's me and him as two adults. I'm cooking, he did groceries. It's
Mm-hmm.
like it's equal, it's fine. I don't have to feel like everything is falling on me. And if I do, I can reach out for help. He is not going
Right.
to read my mind either.
Right. And that's such an interesting thing that you were able see. It's like, okay, for the people that are listening, it takes years to have that type of self-awareness. Like you said, like you're like 8 years, I was doing all this stuff, shadow work,
Yeah.
inner child, like all of that. So it's like for anyone expecting it to all of a sudden magically come, like it does take time. And I think it was so important too that you had the spiritual discipline to know, like, okay, this is not the reality. The reality is that I'm responding from a place from a long time ago, and I always
Yeah,
think about that quote of like, if you're hysterical, it is historical. And
me too.
oftentimes it's like it has to do with early childhood experiences, or like maybe a previous lover, or like it's just those things that you talked about, how in the beginning of the things that we swallowed within ourselves that we couldn't process, that's like coming up for us to an opportunity for us to process it again further with this new person. And I think the hardest part is differentiating, is it really my partner or is it me? Is it working because of my wounds? Is it not working because of me? Is it because of them? And that's the confusing part too. But the fact that you were able to say like, no, like this is my stuff. And I know it doesn't have anything to do with this person. And I'm not going to have a mind read and get into that whole like rabbit hole of he should understand my needs. Cause I get into that too of my partner should attune to my needs the way a parent should when I'm like a baby, right? Because that's what parents do when the baby's like not even 2 years old, can't even speak. It's like, why is the baby crying? I have to guess. And so we're already like pre-programmed, at a pre-verbal level to expect our OG caretakers to understand us in that way where we don't have to say shit. That just like came to me. I'm like, that's why we always want people to mind read. But you're like, I'm an adult.
Exactly.
He's an adult. I understand that it's like not all the time that I'm cooking and cleaning, and I can ask for help. And I think not many people want to ask for help or know how, because it just means that, I don't know, for me, it's like if I admit that I need help or I want something, then it means they love me less, because if they could guess what I want, then it means like they love me the most. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know. Yeah.
Exactly. No, I love this. And I feel like there's this trend on like social media of
Uh-huh.
like people posting about like their couples and their partners and everything. It's like, this person does this, like you should have a Kevin in your life or whatever. Like I remember this one.
Yes. Yes. All the TikTok
You just
videos, I was just like, wow, your boyfriend does all of that for you. Should I
exactly.
love? Should I trade? No, I'm kidding.
No, but yeah, like, and then you start like thinking like, oh my God, my boyfriend doesn't do this. So my boyfriend
Yes.
isn't Kevin. So maybe I should date a Kevin, like, and then I'm like, how freaking toxic this is. Like, because I feel like at the same time that I don't know what's happening nowadays, because like I feel like there was this one big wave of like, I don't need anyone to buy me like, I'm a woman, I don't want flowers on Women's Day. I want like, I don't know, like freedom or equality or something like that. Like I want flowers in sorry, not Mother's Day, Women's Day. Yeah. Like I
Yeah.
want flowers. Okay. Like I don't care what you're saying. Like I also want equality, but I also want flowers, but anyway, so there was this big wave of like, I don't need anything, blah, 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 men are bad, blah, blah, blah. And then now I feel like it's becoming this wave of like, passenger princess, I don't do
Oh,
anything, he carries all my bags for me and things like that. And I caught myself, like we were traveling this past 2 weeks, and I caught myself being like, he's not carrying my bags all the time. Like he caught my, like whenever we like, he's not carrying my bags all the time. Like, and I remember like whenever there were like stairs and things like that, he would carry my carry-on for me, and his carry-on and his backpack, and I also had a backpack. And I remember like, why isn't he carrying my carry-on for me all the time? And I'm like, Camille, like, well, because he's also a human, he's also carrying other things. Like, do I need to put all of this thing like on a man? Like maybe I do, maybe I don't, I don't know. But the point is that, and it always goes back to authenticity, of course.
right.
But I feel like we can also put our partners in this place of like, oh my God, he's not like, I shouldn't even like, these people, like I shouldn't even have to ask for help, because he should
Mm.
just know. Like he should just whatever. Like, do you know? Like all the
Mm-hmm.
time, like, are you as I don't know, because I see a lot of TikToks about like women putting themselves, like putting the man in these places, and I'm like, am I carrying his bag all the time? Am I cooking for him all the time? Am I doing something for him
Mm.
all the time? No, I don't want to be put in this place. Then why am I going to put this pressure and this like level of perfectionism on my
Right.
partner, as if like if I am not there either, and
Mm-hmm.
I remember that like I was in therapy, and we were talking about this, my relationship with anger, and how like in my house, I never had space to express it and process it and everything. And then I told her like, yeah, well, whenever I'm angry, like I feel the same. Like my boyfriend doesn't really like it when I get angry. I feel like I don't have space to express it and everything. And then she said something to me that really like was a coin dropping moment. She was
Oh.
like, yeah, well, Camille, like when you are a child, your parents, their job is to attune to your anger and allow you to express it and understand why you are feeling it, because anything that you're feeling is always valid. Like as an adult or as a child, everything has a reason. Maybe if it, maybe it's not rational, or it doesn't have to do with the physical reality, but
Mm-hmm.
there's a reason for it. So your parents had a job to hold space for your anger. Your boyfriend doesn't, it's not his job to do that. And I was like, oh, it's true. So I'm basically like wanting my boyfriend to be my dad, my parents, like, and I'm getting angry at him because he's not parenting me the way that my parents should have parented myself. Like, it's not his
Yeah.
job. Like, it's not his job to teach me. Like, of course, it's beautiful for us, for each other, for us to hold space for each other and our feelings and our emotions and talk through our stuff. But I can't just dump my anger on him
Right.
and expect him to be like the perfect Kevin, and just do like just know exactly how to take care of it. He's not
Yeah.
perfect, I'm not perfect. Like, I don't know.
The reason why I'm laughing is because, oh, I had a coin drop moment with you too.
Why?
I,
Oh, really?
I,
Oh my God, I
I'm
love
like,
this.
I'm like, oh, so my partner's not supposed to do that shit? No, I'm kidding. But it's so interesting, right? Of how, it's so like, I just think it's just this warped sense of like responsibility, how someone should act. And I think it's such a fine line and a blurred line between your partner and your parents. Because at the end of the day, what happens is a lot of the times you are projecting your inner child stuff, those wounds onto your partner, right? And I can totally relate to you I remember one time, I don't even know. It's like I had this big thing of not feeling supported. Like that was a big wound of mine. And that related to me like having to be a certain way so I could get my parents' attachment, love, all of that stuff. And I just remember going on this journey of being a coach and wanting to do it full time. I didn't get my partner's support 100%. And that's because he had to deal with it with other trauma that he had dealt with, of like people in his life becoming a coach. And I was just really, really upset with that. And I was just like to the like we would get into fights about it, obviously, but it was like a huge wound of mine realizing, oh, it's because I never felt like I got support from my parents. That's why like I'm totally acting it out on you and you're acting it out on me because you had to deal with it with like your previous relationship, whatever. But it is hard because the things that you wanted as a child, they just seep in. And I think it's our job to really be cognizant and understand like, okay, this is my shit. This is something that I have to deal with individually. Like, sure, you can hold space, but I have to do the work on my own as an individual before I can become, you know, or be in this union. Right. And I think that's just the hardest part because like, but if anything, at the end of the day, I'm always learning about myself. I'm always learning, okay, what needs to be healed that I didn't do in childhood? Like, how can I spend
Yeah.
time with little Lisa? Like, here we go
Yeah.
again. you
Yeah.
know?
Oh my God. Yeah. The here
Yeah.
what we go again is really, really true. But I think that there is something that is a really big challenge that I also ask myself. It's like, is this their stuff or my stuff? It's like,
Mm,
is this like something that it's a complete non-negotiable for me, or is this something that or is this a trigger of mine? And for example, like, is it sleeping every day the most like a non-negotiable for together at the same time, a non-negotiable, or is it something that it's like a trauma of mine? And I think
mm,
that the quote that you use, like, if it's hysterical is historical, this you said that on my podcast, it has stayed with me since that moment. And whenever I get hysterical, quote unquote, I think about that quote. And I think that if I am on my bed, anxious, and I feel this full body anxiety about him not being in bed with me. Sorry, I don't think that's like a neutral place of like, this is a non negotiable. It's like, it clearly has like a deeper meaning. Like, I physically feel anxiety. I can't fall asleep.
mm,
Like, I'm
mm-hmm.
sorry, I can't put this on on this other person. And I remember that I was talking to a friend of mine about this. And she was like, wow, like, you really need to go to therapy. Like, she's very
Oh,
blunt. She was like, and she's Brazilian. She was like, amiga, which is like French. She was like,
yeah.
amiga, you really need to go to therapy about this. I think you have some abandonment issues. Because if it was me, I would love to have like the entire bed for me to fall asleep in, and then they would come after. Like, she would
Yeah.
love to fall asleep by herself. And when she
Yeah.
said that, I was like, yeah, clearly this is like a me issue, like a me thing, because if someone else would like not care at all and would even like prefer it to be like that, and I have a big problem with it, to the point that I'm like full body anxiety, can't fall asleep, then
Mm,
clearly it's historical. And I think
right.
that there is, when you reach, and I think it's more about you working on those like his like hysterical moments, quote unquote, like this
Mm-hmm.
really triggered points, let's call it like that, like those
Right.
triggers, reach, like, release them so you can reach a neutral place and then understand like, okay, this is actually like a non-negotiable. How can I talk to about this with my partner? Or yeah, this really doesn't even matter for me that much. So there are a lot of things that used to trigger me in the beginning of our relationship that nowadays I know how to deal with way better. And it's so interesting to see that the more that I heal those
Mm,
things, the less that they happen as well, because either I don't notice or they don't need to happen that often because I've done that work in this specific energy.
mm-hmm.
And like, and I think that when we were talking about like not dumping your anger on your versus the dumping versus holding space.
Yeah.
So like on Sunday, I was feeling really weird. And I remember like feeling this, I was feeling like this like it wasn't a resentment towards him, but I was feeling really weird. And I was able to recognize that I was feeling unsafe I was just feeling unsafe. I felt like my inner child was afraid. Oh yeah, because I had woken up in the middle of the night and he couldn't sleep because he had like his insomnia and he was processing his own trauma. He couldn't sleep because he was thinking about his own stuff and everything. So I woke up in the middle of the night, like, and touched the other side of the bed. He wasn't there. And like I could feel my inner child like, oh my God, like I was
Yeah.
abandoned, like, oh my God, it's dark. Where is my partner? And then I went inside in like in the living room. I was like, oh my God, what are you doing? And everything. And he was like, oh baby, I couldn't sleep. And I was like, please come to bed with me and everything. And so he was like, yeah, okay. And he went to bed and everything. But the next day I could still feel like this unsafeness inside of me. And
Mm.
in previous moments, I would have just given him like the cold shoulder, just silent treatment, ignore him the rest of the day because I was pissed because he wasn't sleeping in the same time as me. And
Mm.
at that moment, I was able to like I felt inside of myself. I was like, I'm feeling unsafe, and I'm still feeling a little bit like I could feel that my inner child was still feeling really scared about what happened
Mm.
last night. So I felt like he was like working, and I like touched him, and I was like, I sat on, and he looked at me. I sat on his lap. I started crying and said, "Baby, I
Oh.
feel unsafe." And he like hugged me, and he was like, "It's okay, baby." Blah blah blah. I told him like I felt unsafe because of yesterday and everything. Can you please not leave bed tonight? And he said, "Yes, of course, baby. Even if I can't sleep, I'll stay with you and watch something or whatever, read or anything beside you. I
Mm.
won't leave this night, okay? Don't worry." And then he made me food, he cooked, and I felt like he was like, "Now you sit there on the couch, I'll cook for you. Don't worry. I don't want," he was like, "I don't want you near the kitchen. I'm going to do everything. I don't want you like trying to help me." And then by like after 2 hours, I was feeling like a happy kid, I was like having my food, and I was feeling like baby Camille was really feeling taken care of, but
Mm.
not because he parented me. Like, of course, he supported me, but I was the one who vulnerably reached out for help. I told him what was going
Right.
on. I um I was the one who parented myself before him. And because I
Mm-hmm.
was able to show up in such a vulnerable place of like, this is me, this is how I feel, instead of like dumping my anger on him or like giving him the cold shoulder or something, he was then able to act also from like a loving place. And of course, like he's someone who's understanding, he gives me space, he's comfortable with like vulnerabilities and things like that, and of course willing to take care of me. So of course having a partner that is open for that is also really
Mm-hmm.
important. But I think that before that I was able to recognize what was going on inside of me, and instead of just expecting him to deal with everything, I am also taking the lead in my own self, in understanding my own self. And I think that's so important and something that a lot of people neglect. It's like, they just should know that.
Absolutely. And I love that you took the lead in your own healing. Like you know yourself
Yeah.
enough to know what was coming up for you when you feel unsafe and what you needed. You asked for what you needed. And I think that, like you talked about, that's the integral part of what it means to have an adult relationship, right?
Yes,
Of like
yes.
being your own advocate, because it goes back to what you talked about of how it was described in that book of how we always swallowed our true needs because it was often dismissed or gaslit by parents who couldn't fulfill those needs. And so now, in order to actually rewrite that story, we can be our own advocates and say, hey, I do need this, even if there's that lingering feeling of like, oh, shoot, are they going to ignore me? Is this going, so I might as well not even say that, right? Or, and then hold silent treatment. But the act of bravery and courage that it takes to say, I'm honoring what little Camille like needs. I'm going to tell my partner. And that's like the test for yourself of, do you have the courage to say that, knowing that this person can dismiss you, but then also validation, the fact that you chose a partner who can withstand and hold space and have vulnerability and not make you feel bad about that and say, oh, Cami, like, how many times are we going to do this? Like, I can't. It's like, he did not dismiss you. He's like, what do you need? And that's the emotional maturity of an actual partner. And I will say this again for the listeners, like, that's the type of partner that you need. The one that actually
Yeah.
honors and acknowledges you too, because you honor yourself and won't necessarily compromise who they are to meet your needs, but will do it in a loving and a gentle way because they care about you and they love you. And that's what it means to have a really good, healthy partnership. So,
Yeah, completely agree, especially with the part that you talk about compassion and gentleness and kindness and love and things like that. Because I think, I don't know if you agree, I think and I feel like in the spiritual world of partnerships, I think that there is this message, and I put myself in this like expectation of like, I'm the woman, I can feel whatever I want to feel, and you're the man, you have to be the rock, and you can't like have any excessive emotion, and you have to take whatever I put on you and then be the bigger person. To maybe that's just me actually, but because my dad used to be that person, so I know exactly where it comes from. But anyways, but it's still like in the Kevin TikToks, like there's like this one specific thing that I'm referring to. But anyways, um like the Kevin people, like I get angry and my boyfriend makes me cookies or something, bakes me cookies or something like that, and I felt like super extra entitled to like act out in whatever way that I needed, and expected him to just like be this perfect rock that wouldn't be triggered by whatever I was doing. And I was like, yeah, you're like gaslighting me, you're not allowed, you're not giving me space to feel or something like that, when in truthfulness, like it was actually, I wasn't doing it from a place of love and compassion. I was doing it from a triggered inner child place, and I was actually aggressing him in the process. Like I was just dumping my anger on him instead of
right.
like recollecting myself and kind of instead of acting out as my inner child, it's like understanding what is happening and then
Yeah.
communicating to him, like. So, and I think that that's really important. And I love, like, one thing that while you were talking about the whole authenticity and not self-abandon, there's this sentence, like this expression that came to my mind now. It's almost as if like while you are in a relationship in your adulthood, but not only in a romantic one, like with anything or anyone in your life,
Right.
you have to become this guardian of your authenticity, like this guardian of your authentic self. You have to be like this person who will like own it and be like, don't worry, like the entirety of Camille, I am going to be the guardian of your authenticity, of your authentic self, and I'm going to make sure that we are not self-abandoning. And I think that's super important as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's the point where it's like you can have your emotions and you can be messy with it. But for me, I like to do it in a way where I've processed it. So I understand it. So I'm just not dumping. So I don't have tantrums. So I'm not acting from a place of just almost like reckless abandon or just emotionally hot mess express. Like that's just me. That's how I am. I'm like, okay, I need space. And it's funny because my partner and I, we talked about it because he's more of the type where he wants to hear like me as I process, but that's just not me. And so I often retreat, and we call it turtle shelling. So that was something
Mm,
that we had to navigate together of how do we process things differently, because in the relationship, I'm a cat and he's a dog. And
mm,
so it's like, even though we have different personalities and how we process, it's how do we work together? And like you said, it's just like being able to know that about yourself and communicate it to someone else gives them almost a playbook on you, but you have to be the one to write it. You have to be the guardian, like you talked about, and just be your own advocate, because at the end of the day, it's like you're either operating from your subconscious or your conscious. And so that's just something that I feel like I've always just been trying to work on consistently. Why I do reparenting stuff, why it's so important to look at these different things. So I know what's coming up for myself and I'm not letting myself get blindsided by my own emotions of like, what the hell is going on? Like the other day, I was like angry about something and I was talking to my friend, but I couldn't understand why. And I was so judgmental of people on fucking social media. Like I was such a critic. I have no idea where the hell this came from. And it was like, I was just angry. I was like angry that things were harder than I thought it was going to be, right? Of like starting my business, blah, 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 all that stuff. And I was like, oh, that's why I'm hating on all these people. you know?
Yeah.
But it's like, oh, okay, I just have more information about myself. And that's why I feel like I don't know. I don't know how you feel, but I will never get bored of being with myself because I just learn things about myself all the damn time. And I'm like, okay, like here we go. Here's a new
Yeah.
thing, you know?
It's like, let's go off for a new adventure, like Dora the Explorer, like the backpack and everything. And you're like, okay, I guess there's one more mountain to climb. Woohoo! Like exhausted, actually like. But yeah. I recently discovered some things as well. I was like in therapy that I was like, wow, like, and
Yeah.
it's so interesting how they come in, like, because he was projecting a lot of like my mother issues
Mm,
and how recently I've been triggered by a specific friend, and I'm like just
mhm.
bitching about her like in therapy, like, because blah 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 blah. And by the end of the session, just realizing that again she's only just mirroring back my mother wounds. And I was like, oh wow, I guess
Yes.
mommy is coming up a lot recently, because she's not with me, she has to be, I guess, like, for me to work through these things, it has to come
Mhm.
through other people, because I'm now in Greece, she's back in Brazil, we don't talk that much, so it's not like she's triggering me every day, but her
Yeah.
my like unprocessed stuff with her is of course triggered by other people in my life. That's super important. I
Yeah.
think that the key thing is self-awareness. It's like awareness. It's awareness of where
Mhm.
you're coming from. Are you coming from this inner child unprocessed self? Are you coming from this inner child processed self? Because it can be the inner child of like, I want someone to cook for me, and then you can ask that,
Mm,
or you can buy
mhm.
yourself dinner or something like that. Are you coming from your adult self, your whatever,
Right.
it's like, are you coming from your ego? Are you coming, what I always talk about is like, are you coming from your soul? Are you coming from your intuition? Or are you coming from your mind? Are you coming from the need
Mm,
of external validation? Or are you coming from authenticity and expansion? And I think that the level of awareness from where you are coming from will inform you what or whether you need to look at certain aspects of your lives and parts of your being, or not, or you can, just continue doing whatever you're doing, and they will also inform whatever responses you're going to get. Because if you're coming from
right.
a triggered ego mind place, you are going to receive a response that is in that level. It's like energy, it's energetically you are. If you're coming from a soulful place, from an intuition place, from a heartful place, you are going to receive an aligned answer that is in the same place. So I can't come to my boy, like if this happens, is because also whatever is being responded is also aligned. But if I come to him in this very, whenever we were having like very important, like important discussions and arguments, and I would drop into my heart, and I would
Mhm.
really like dissolve the anger, dissolve whatever, like, resentment that I had. And I was really in my heart trying to understand and see and hear the person that was in front of me, not with an
Yeah.
agenda of like, this is what I'm going to answer, or being in a battleground, like a battleship, or whatever, like in a battle with him. And I would really drop into my heart. It was so crazy, like the response from him, and how things would
Mhm.
start to unfold in another way, and how the argument would end really quickly, or he would get into a realization by himself of a deeper meaning of something, just from me being in my heart, like just from me holding this energy of holding the space from my heart, like how
Mm,
impactful that can be. And it all goes back to awareness, like awareness of where you're coming from.
hmm. And also, like you just mentioned, just validating that the energy, right? If I'm coming to you in a calm, centered, processed place versus me just dumping all of my stuff on you, right? And how receptive people are willing to be and meet you where you are. But I think a lot of it comes also to how much work are they doing on themselves to know to not take it personally. That's a whole other thing. And that's where I think a lot of the times people can get stuck, where it becomes almost, I will blame, it's so easy to blame yourself and say, well, it's my wounds, it's my stuff, I need to change. But then also, like, letting your other partner take radical responsibility. Like, that's what I think is like an ingredient to a healthy partnership, is just radical responsibility on both of your parts to work on what it is that's triggering you, in order to have that relationship where you can openly just be transparent and talk about it. Because it doesn't make sense if one person's doing all of this inner work and the other person is kind of like just being let off the hook, right? But then just knowing, okay, are they emotionally enough and like mature enough to say, hey, I know my part, I could have done this, I could have done that. And that's something I remember, I just didn't know what repair looked like in a relationship growing up, because with my parents, they would just like, get in a fight, and then there would be no making up until maybe a couple of days afterwards, and I would just like blow over. That was it. There was no acknowledgement of, this is why I'm upset, this is why you made me upset, how come, like, there was just none of that. And so I remember when I first got with my partner, the first year was very difficult for me, because I would often get triggered and having to like work through, how do I respond, all of that stuff. But then what did actual repair look like? And then just having the courage and being in that vulnerable and intimate space of like, this is why I was upset, so how can we do it better next time, and all of that stuff. But it's never taught, those things. So yeah.
Yeah. And also, I feel like, I don't know, I have a lot, like, it's so hard for me to just shut down my anger and my ego and be
Mm.
um, like just go and like be the first one to apologize, be the first one to start the conversation, be the first one to like dissolve the anger and be like, listen, I'm sorry for this or something like that.
Yeah.
And because you feel like you're losing, and I think that I have to constantly remind myself that I am I will always be losing if I think that we're fighting against each other, if it's like a battle,
Oh, so
because he's
good.
in my
Yeah.
team. So if I think that, it's like the person that is on the football field and it's not passing the ball to the person on your own team because they want the ball to themselves and they're like, I'm gonna score, thinking that they're competing with their teammates. Like, you're not going to score if you are the one holding the ball by yourself, like going through the entire field. And
Yeah.
I think that in relationships that happens a lot, and it's something that we've been telling a lot to each other, like, baby, don't take it personally. And we know that this
Mm.
sentence is something for the person to like get out of their like ego high heels, like it's like, okay, it's
Yeah.
not about me, like it's not about me. They're not doing this to affect me, like drop
Right.
off the, like, don't take it personally, look at it in a neutral place. Why did I get triggered? Okay, I understand, express it to them, but understand that most scenarios, like, they didn't do it on, like, they didn't do it on purpose, but of
Mm-hmm.
course it's important
Mm-hmm.
to acknowledge it and express it for them to maybe look at how they can do it differently. But at the same time, it's also like, it's not about you, and for me it's so hard
Mm-hmm.
to hear this, like, it's not about you. It's like, no, everything has to be about me, because it's like I'm the person who's um like I'm the one who's being triggered, so of course it has to do with me, but
Yeah.
it's not, like they're like he's not sleeping with me because he wants to trigger me, blah, blah. Like it doesn't have anything to do with me. It has to do with his own trauma,
Right.
his trauma response, his like own stuff,
Yeah.
so it's like stop making it about you, and also
Mm-hmm.
look at the other person with compassion, not empathy, in the way that you're like going into the pain with them, but it's like holding the compassion of like, why are they acting in this way, and I think that that's something that I've been trying to do more and more, and that I did all with my parents, for example, when I was in my own healing journey. It's like, instead of holding this anger and resentment towards them, it's like, why did they do what they did, and it's normally connected to their childhood and how they grew up and how they
Right.
were taught how to do things. And so I think that helps so much the healing
Mm-hmm.
process, like having compassion for whomever you're in a relationship with as well, like no matter if it's like partnership or not.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. I feel like we went through so many different like topics interwoven together.
I know. I was actually going
So,
to ask you, because we talked
yeah.
about, like, we started talking about the attachment and authenticity. I was wondering if you had, like, because you've been in a relationship for way longer than me. I think it's been like 5, 6 years, 4.
No, oh my God, it's been 2 years with my now partner. Yeah, like
Ah,
almost 2 years.
okay.
Uh-huh.
So is there like a specific thing that you remember of you abandoning certain parts of your authenticity for the need of attachment or something, like what I said about the sleeping thing?
Yeah. I would say not with him in the beginning. Not
Mm.
I did that a lot before him. Like just always abandoning. Oh, I can tell you about someone that wasn't him. I was like the last guy
No,
I
you
dated
can, yeah.
before him. He was basically my COVID boyfriend. And I just didn't, I don't know. I always ended up with guys where we would get super close. And then all of a sudden, like I wouldn't hear from them for a couple of days. So it'd be like this rubber band effect, right?
Mm.
And so I was like, okay, like feel secure, then insecure, feel secure and insecure. And I just remember one of them went camping and I didn't hear from them from a couple of days, but like we would talk all the time.
Oh my God,
Not that he
my
didn't have
anxiety could
service or anything.
never.
Like not that like he didn't have service or anything, but I just, oh my God, girl. And I was taking these flower essences. This is a I was taking these flower essences that had me worked on my childhood abandonment wounds. So I was
Mm.
feeling it more and more and more. So if you don't know what flower essences are, basically they're created by this doctor named Dr. Bach. And what it does is actually heal you at a vibrational level. So it's like these drops that you put, these tinctures. Um,
Beautiful.
and so I was doing that and working on childhood abandonment. And for when that moment happened of not hearing from him, I just remember crying in the shower, And it was like, I didn't even have to do tapping to somatically be in that place. It's like you were talking about being in bed and like, oh my God, I physically feel unsafe. Like I literally physically felt in my body of just like abandonment, even though it was this person, even though I knew like all of that stuff. And I just remember this feeling of like wanting my mother,
Wow.
and just crying. It was so powerful. After that, I was like, I don't want to take these flower essences. This is way too intense for me. I was like, fuck this shit. I'm gonna try something else. Um, but it was so intense and so visceral. And I didn't tell him how I felt, right? I
Wow.
didn't tell him how I felt because one, I didn't want to be too needy. I didn't want to appear
Mm.
needy. I wanted to appear like the chill girl that was fucking secure. I didn't want to show him that I had anxious attachment, all of that stuff, like this swallowing all of those emotions instead of seeing it as an opportunity of like, can I express to him as our relationship is unfolding, how that made me feel of not hearing from him and what I need. And I was too scared at the time to do that because the thought of him abandoning me by me expressing my needs was somehow far worse than like me abandoning myself, which I did. And so that was just a mirror into the type of advocate I was for myself at the time, and realizing that and knowing like, hey, like, why did you do that? Why weren't you able to express it? All of these things. And it's just, I was just so used to doing it at the time. But yeah, so that was like a big lesson in just what happens when I abandon myself in order to please another, or just not even please another, but in order to keep the relationship.
Yeah.
So
Like not disrupt the other
yeah,
person.
exactly. Like walking on eggshells. If I do this, then will they leave me? If I truly express how I feel, will they leave me? But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's like you lose yourself by not honoring yourself. All those like little moments of just brushing it under the rug because you don't want to seem too much. And it's like they won't ever have an opportunity to truly love you or know you until you show that side of yourself. And so that's why I think, and you talked about it, just like shadow work, how like much of a big proponent I am of shadow work, because it truly helps you love those parts of you that you don't even want to show to someone else. And if you can't do it on your own, then how can you expect to show those things and still be okay? Because like relationships, no matter what type it is, it's all about intimacy and sharing your authentic truth. And that's what it goes back to, of like what you're so passionate, what I am passionate about is just like, how do you connect to your inner truth and just share it no matter what, all the time.
Yeah. And I also love how this connects to what you said about radical responsibility, because your healing is your responsibility. It's
Mm-hmm.
not someone else's responsibility. Like your partner is not going to heal you. They're not going to like do the shadow work for you. They're not
Yeah.
gonna be like the shaman, like holding the space and be like going to the light or whatever, like or like guiding your family constellation for you. Okay, so what did your, which is something that like I sometimes can fall into, like trying to
Girl,
be
same.
like my
Same.
boyfriend's therapist, but whatever, like it's not supposed to be like that, like that's not super healthy. They can stand, like that's something that I remember that I used to tell my dad, and I also told my boyfriend, like if you are like in a pool and you're drowning and kind of like learning how to swim, it's not about the other person jumping in and like saving you and helping you um swim, because
Mm-hmm.
they will be saving you but not allowing you to like learn how to get out of it. So I remember that my dad, he used to be like really this person that wanted to teach me everything about life. Like, of course, he's a parent, but he used to be like really like, okay, Camille, so you need to do this and this budget and blah blah blah. I'm like, Dad, you need to let me drown a little bit. Like, I need to learn
Mm.
things by experience. Like, you can't jump inside of the pool with me. So he was like, oh yeah, what do I do? Should I just watch you drown? I was like, no, Dad, you stay outside of the pool, rooting for me and supporting me and
Mm.
yelling like, you go, you can do this, you can do this. This is what I need. I don't need someone who's looking at me and says, I knew it, you're going to drown because you didn't do what I said, what I told you, you didn't move your arms and your legs in this specific way. It's like, I don't need that. I need someone who's outside of the pool rooting and supporting me and knowing that
Yeah.
I will get to the other side, and I have to do the actual swimming and the drowning and the spitting the water out of my mouth. And it's the same with our partners. Like, of course, we can be there and support and hold space, but the actual person who's going to do the actual swimming and
Mm-hmm.
the actual healing has to be each one. And I think that that is like a radical responsibility of your own healing paired with the holding space for each other. And that's what I think it's like a healthy, conscious, quote unquote, relationship, is like holding space for each other's pools, and like
Yeah.
supporting each other swimming, but not like
Right.
jumping inside and like, hold on me, I'll save you. Like, no, no, not gonna
And it's
happen.
and it's like just knowing where you end and the other person begins.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
It's so easy to just have that like codependency, be the savior, like all of that, like just everything. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
This is
I love
good.
that. It was, oh my
This is
God, what
good.
time? Oh my God.
I know.
I
I'm
had
like, this, this is good. This is good. Is there,
I feel like I went into a vortex and now I'm coming back.
no, we do. I feel like we could go on for so much longer. And then I was thinking, oh, this will be a really long episode for people.
Yeah, maybe you could split it in two or something.
Yeah. But any last minute things you want to share?
I think the thing that keeps coming to me, like this thing of like being the guardian of your
Mm,
authenticity, like the guardian
mhm.
angel of your authenticity. I think it's something that is incredibly beautiful and necessary, but the having compassion for whenever you do lean into the need for attachment and the need to be this like inner child that just needs and wants to be taken care of, because that's okay as well. And I think that the only way that you'll be able to reach authenticity and being the guardian of your authenticity is once is moving past the blocks and understanding and dealing and working through the traumas that are blocking you, and keeping you in this space of attachment. So I think that is like having the aware, like if I could sum up everything that we said, it's like
Yeah.
cultivating the self-awareness to understand where you are coming from, if you're coming from attachment or authenticity, having compassion for when you are coming through from attachment, and understanding why you're coming from attachment, and then working through the traumas and the shadows and whatever needs to be worked through, so you
Mhm.
can then show up as your authentic self and then show up as the guardian of your authenticity, so you can create a life for yourself and relationships and whatever is it in the material world that is aligned with that authentic self of yours. But this can only happen once you like create this space for these other things to come through as well, because otherwise it's just, no. So
It
yeah.
doesn't work. It doesn't work.
Yeah,
Oh, that was
exactly.
so beautifully summed up. Oh my gosh. And where can people find you if they want to work with you, if they want more of this, more of your wisdom, all of that good stuff?
So for sure, head over to my podcast called the Blossom Experiment Podcast. It's in the majority of the platform players, so like
Mm.
Spotify, iTunes, maybe Google Chrome or something, Google Cast or something like that.
Yeah.
I have like over 60 episodes there, so a lot of stuff, a lot
Yeah.
of my travel and intuitive traveling diaries, intuitive living. I talk a lot about intuition there. And then if you want to work one-on-one with me, I have these sessions that I call flowing inwards, in which I basically help you connect your intuition and um process stuff somatically, like process all of the blocks somatically through your body and with the guidance of your intuition, so you can then understand what is it really that is your authentic self is calling you towards, and then create your life from there. And I'm also wanting to start offering something with like intuitive wellness, especially because of like my
Ooh.
yoga thing and the I like
Yeah.
the health certification, my obsession with health and wellness and body stuff. So maybe
Yeah.
that will be something. But yeah, you can book a session through the link in either my Instagram, which is at the Blossom Experiment, or in any of the recent podcasts. There is like a calendar link there. So yeah, and then we can do a one-on-one session. You can come and DM me on Instagram. We can chat about this and whatever. I just really like to talk about this topic. So I'm free to and happy to help anyone.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for being on the HeartStream Musings. I would love to have you again. This won't be the last time we have Cami on the podcast because we just love riffing on whatever topics. And I hope that all of you just had a fun time with us. Thank you for listening, supporting, all of that good stuff. And I will catch you later.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Bye.